Hello, everybody.
Hey.
This is Zachariah Russell, my brother.
Yep.
I just wanted to say something real quick before we get started in our discussion. The reason why we have these videos is for two main reasons. One is to show Verastructor ideals and ideas to the public. But secondly, a very important second, is just to show proper discourse. Just people conversing, maybe disagreeing, but trying to figure out why and trying to understand one another. And even though me and Jess are married, and that's our typical video, we feel like that's severely lacking in media, is this image of a married couple having an intellectual conversation and coming to an agreement. That's not typical. And we're so used, I think everyone's so used to social media where I scream, you scream, we're not even discussing the same thing. I got a message today where someone was trying to respond to one of our videos and they weren't even responding to the content in the video. So they were bringing up a wonderful point, which I agree with. It was about our education video. And the idea was that we should be grateful for the good that we do have. And I totally agree. We should be grateful for the wonderful blessings that we have. But that's not mutually exclusive from the idea that things aren't great. And we should look into it and try and figure out how we can make things a better place. So here I am with Zachariah. And today we wanted to discuss what makes a good video game. And I think before we get started...
a little bit of a tone shift.
Right, for sure. For sure. Well, and that's why I wanted to preface this a little bit, because no matter what topic we're getting down to, if we're coming to truth, we're coming to universal truths while discussing something, then it almost doesn't matter what we're discussing, because then we can take those universal truths and apply them
to other topics.
And I think that's something we don't do a whole lot. We talk about specialization and being specialized in something. I'm going to know exactly what makes a video game good. But that doesn't necessarily help you. So you got to attach it to universal truths.
Well, and it is difficult because obviously context changes. What makes a video game good isn't necessarily what makes a movie good.
That's interesting. So why is that?
Different mediums, they have different factors in how they are consumed by the people that consume them.
So you think the interface
should
dictate the content to some degree?
Well, and I agree with you that you can take information you learn from one thing and apply it to everything else.
Oh, okay, great.
I'm just saying that it's like you said, it's not a binary.
Correct.
There's both context and truth. You have to, and sometimes truth will apply in one situation because the context is what makes it a truth.
So so that's why they often will call it comparative, right? Mm-hmm. It's not enough to just say apples are oranges. You have to figure out the differences as you're making the comparison, right? Mm-hmm. It's comparative. So there are similarities and differences. I think we find, though, that when we look at the similarities, there's more similarities than we might care to admit at first.
Right.
For instance, the conversation is naturally going to gravitate because of the news. We at Verastructor try to avoid the news for the most part, just so it's easier to stick to universal truths and not get caught up in the emotions of a moment. But I think we can stay objective here. Is the game The Last of Us Part 2.
Right. Which is a very controversial game right now.
And the main reason, I think you can break it down to this simple idea of, should a medium match the interface that you're using?
Right.
So let me explain. A lot of people love the first game, The Last of Us. Came out in 2013 on the PlayStation 3.
Is considered by many people to be one of, if not the greatest game of all time.
Now explain to me, because you and I have had a slight divergence on this.
Yes.
You have said that you don't like it as much as me, and what are the reasons why? This is the first The Last of Us.
So with the first one, which both of us have played, I am somewhat of a gamer, you know.
We both are.
Yeah.
Slightly different, but
I
overlap.
Yeah, I might do it more than you, but ultimately our biggest passion probably comes with these like big atmospheric story-driven games.
Stories, correct.
And to me, my absolute favorite games of all time are games that I feel couldn't be replicated even somewhat by other mediums.
Great. So get into that, because one of the biggest criticisms, right, of The Last of Us is that it could have been a TV show.
A really good one.
A really good TV show, and not lose that much when it comes to the interface.
Right. The benefits that it gained from being a game were the benefits that every game gets from being a game. Which is that you're literally playing the character.
Okay.
That's the main benefit it gets. It's more immersive just by the nature of it.
And that's one of my arguments is, so what if it is a fantastic TV show that then lets you be the character, go through the hardships, feel those hardships, and then the characters end up being just as good as some of the best TV shows.
Yeah, the writing's as good as some of the best TV shows.
You have Joel and Ellie, main characters, and their dynamic is fantastic.
Yeah, a strange father-daughter dynamic, but obviously Joel has reservations against that for you know.
I think it's safe to say why. It's the beginning of the game.
You're right, because his daughter died.
His daughter gets killed in the outbreak of a zombie disease.
Yeah. Based
off of a real life fungus.
That makes ants climb as high as they can.
The cordyceps fungus.
Yeah. What it does is it will attach itself to an ant's brain. I don't know if it's specifically ants, but that's just what I read about. And then they'll have the ant climb up a tree and fall down.
No, I think it stays on the tree, and then it creates its fungus, and then it releases pores from there, so they fall down on the ants.
Oh, okay. I thought it fell down just to like gain distance, but that might be what it is.
I think it might fall down at the end.
Okay.
So it releases all these spores. Regardless, this is
a real thing.
This is a real thing. Very unlikely to pass on to humans.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting point. And I think this is important, talking about The Last of Us just in terms of story real quick, is that fungus is really easy to cure.
Right.
There are no fungal vaccines today because you don't need them. You can get over-the-counter, you can literally get athlete's foot spray. And you could spray it on the body of someone and the fungus would die and leave just the body of the person. So the fact that this actually occurred, first of all, making the jump from ants to humans is nearly impossible.
Right.
But then making that jump and then not being curable by antifungal spray or antifungal...
By the methods that we currently have.
To
combat fungus.
Makes no sense.
So this game takes itself very seriously.
Yes, it does.
So it's not a game that has a little bit of both. Like my favorite game of all time, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which is a very dark and gloomy game, and we don't need to talk about it, but just the point that it will have comedic moments. It'll have lighthearted moments. Your suspension of disbelief is a little more lenient when it's obvious that the game isn't taking itself 100% seriously.
I see what you mean.
And so when
the escapism element, right? It's harder to escape to a place that's more real.
Yeah.
Or rather, more realistic, because you can have games that mirror reality very, very well, but aren't reality at all.
Right. Well, and I mean, The Last of Us is probably a good example of that, where something fantastical like the land in Majora's Mask has very serious moments that may or may not resonate with you, but at least the fantastic sense of it, the fantasy elements, they're baked into the world.
Right.
So you come in with a natural suspension of disbelief. With The Last of Us, there's none of that. You come in and they're trying to make it as real as possible.
Correct.
So that's
even using real locations, straight up
go
scanning
to Salt
them.
Lake City.
Right, straight up scanning the locations. All the buildings are there.
And in the second one, you go to Seattle.
Yeah, so the second one's no different. It's not like they create a bunch of new cities and places. It's all real places.
Yeah, the only part of it that isn't like analogous to our life is the fungal outbreak.
Yeah, that's it. Because they even haven't advanced really in terms of guns, in terms of vehicles, in terms of construction techniques, in terms of... Because even the city in Jackson, right? That's kind of a safe place, kind of. They are building a hydro dam to create energy for the town, right?
Right.
So the technology hasn't really advanced after the outbreak.
Yeah, time has passed and it hasn't advanced. But the main point I'm trying to make is that when you're taking this as seriously as you can, flaws in logic, flaws in the reasoning of the story and the characters are all the less forgivable.
Okay.
When you don't have as strong of a suspension of disbelief.
Okay.
So if you say to yourself, this is basically the real world, except this fungal virus outbreak, then the only thing that you can look at and not, judge with the scrutiny you would the real world is the fungal virus outbreak.
And maybe that's why, so getting to The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Maybe that's why critics love it so much. Because have you ever met someone who was just crazy lovable? They were bad people, you knew they were bad people, but you just loved them.
Or at least flawed people.
Right. And what I'm getting at is Joel, right? You have this guy who's extremely lovable, but he is not a good person. Or he's rather good. He's not perfect.
I mean, he's a flawed person in a very flawed time.
Extremely violent.
Yeah, in a very violent time.
Correct. And he carves his way because of his violence. He's able to survive. That's kind of the point of the first one. But then you get to The Last of Us Part 2.
And spoilers. Are we going there?
I mean, we can get into spoilers, but I think it's not a spoiler to say people are not liking the characters as much. On average, people don't like the characters.
So there are a significant number of new characters introduced.
Characters, exactly.
And, I mean, that was probably going to happen. That happens in most sequels.
It's Last of Us Part 2. They're going to have...
Yeah, some sequels will introduce like one new main character, but this one has like one focal new main character, but a lot of new important characters,
supporting characters.
Yeah,
right.
And
but the idea is that a lot of readers, viewers, players, they don't like these new characters.
They don't find them as likable.
But you're saying, hey, listen, this isn't a normal video game. This isn't a melodrama where it's good versus evil and you get to very much love the good people and hate the evil people. These are real people in a bad time.
Yeah. It's kind of challenging. So I think that we should first establish some things. So I don't love The Last of Us Part 1. I do like it. I think it is a good game. I also do not love The Last of Us Part 2, but I actually like it better.
Okay.
And I think Micah is the opposite, where he really likes the first one.
I don't really have an opinion
on the second one.
Because I haven't played it.
That's fair.
So I hear that the characters aren't as lovable. I do like characters, but another great example, this is why we like to also talk about games like Morrowind.
Morrowind, yeah.
Out of all the Elder Scrolls games, this is the game where the world is king. The world is the story. The world is the character.
Different priority.
Completely different priority. It's a fantastical world. It's unique. It's special. You fall in love with the scenery and with the animals.
How could you like Morrowind more than The Last of Us? That's impossible. Morrowind has bad writing, bad graphics.
Bad characters.
Bad characters.
Vivek is a one-dimensional guy.
Vivek? Do you know how it's pronounced?
They pronounce it lots of ways.
We're not nerds. We don't know how to pronounce it. But
Zachy, we are nerds.
Yeah, okay, we're not that much nerds. We're like 40%.
We're just not specialized nerds.
Sure.
We are generalized nerds.
Very generalized.
We know more lore than the average person about lots of different things, but we don't know as much as the specialists.
Right. So I think when people, if someone says that, if that ever happens to you where someone is like, how could you like this thing better than this thing? And you look at it and you realize that what they're discussing is not the medium that you're talking about in general. So
I see what you're saying.
So I when I tell people like I don't love The Last of Us Part 1 because I feel like I could have gotten that experience from a TV show, and that doesn't mean it's bad.
It's very, very good. It would be one of the best TV shows.
It'd probably be one of the best. But and they say, well, here's all these things that make it better than the thing you like. I'm like, I feel like you're analyzing the video game I like with like a movie or TV show lens. You're forgetting that what makes video games different is freedom of choice.
Yeah, video games, we talked about the interface, right? Mm-hmm. TV shows, movies, passive. You're looking at it. Mm-hmm. You don't get to make decisions.
Not at all.
Video games, for the most part, have had a hard time giving the players too much choice.
Right.
Because let's say you give them one big choice. Now you have to make 2 video games worth of material so that they can have
2 video games,
choice.
2 movies or 2 TV shows.
Okay, I see what you mean.
You see what I'm saying? Because a video game, the effort that goes behind a video game, at least in the writing part, is so much more quantity, and so what we find is there's a lot less quality.
That makes sense.
So I think a lot of people...
So like Morrowind, you have you have tons of stories, tons, but is there character development? No. Very little.
Not at all.
I think you could argue there's some character development.
Maybe inherent develop you attribute to the character you created.
That, and I think there's a little bit with even Vivek.
Yeah.
But not enough to be a good TV show. It would be a bad TV show. But it's a good enough video game. I think it's a very good video game.
It is a good one, for sure. And the things it gets right are things that I've seen replicated per se, but they're not things that you can never take away the vibe, the world that Morrowind has from it.
Correct. And that's what people also like about The Last of Us.
That's interesting that you say that.
It is, because I think some people are able to make the escape and some people are not, because it's so close to reality.
Right.
The world of The Last of Us, some people see it as a character and some people don't. Mm-hmm. And I think we can both agree that a lot of players, based off of their negative experience, have found it too close to reality. Yes. We are sitting in a time where we are quarantining because of a disease.
Right.
We are having major divisions that is leading to the loss of life.
Feels like
based off of race.
It feels like about 10 stone throws away from apocalypse.
Correct.
Well, it's nowhere close, but we can see it.
Yeah, it's like, why am I going to play this game
that's not escapist at all?
Yeah, exactly. And
it's very real and challenging.
One review I read that I thought hit this right on the nose is he said, I stopped playing The Last of Us Part 2 because it's too close to my reality right now and it is depressing. And life is already too depressing that I don't want to do it twice at the same time.
In this time that was supposed to be my casual time.
My time to escape to the world of wizards or aliens
or whatever. Even another game by Naughty Gog.
Gog and Agog. It does feel like the war of Gog and Agog in The Last of Us.
Even another game from Naughty Dog that's set in the real world, Uncharted, is not this same way.
No,
there is suspension of disbelief within Uncharted, just obviously different time periods.
It's because the locations aren't actually real.
Well, and the
Maybe the city is. They're like, we are going to Kathmandu, and they go to Kathmandu. And the city is, but then they go into a monastery. That monastery is not real.
Well, and among other things, Nathan Drake is the main character. He'll do things that aren't really physically possible for a human to do.
No.
And then
I throw a rope with a hook on it into the wall, and then it sticks every time.
And then he'll murder 30 people, and it's like he says like a one-liner.
What's that term?
What's
that term?
What?
The term where the story itself is unaware of the story itself.
Is that narrative dissonance?
Something like that. It's just like
ludonarrative dissonance.
Yeah, it's ludonarrative dissonance.
Although people usually use that as a way to criticize games.
I think people have criticized Uncharted for that,
having ludonarrative dissonance.
but it's too fun.
Well,
it's entertaining.
Well, and if you're gonna get mad at Uncharted, you also got to get mad at Indiana Jones and Star Wars. You kill people, and then it's like, ha ha. Right, and I think that's like almost a message from the creators to the players not to take that too seriously.
Right.
Even if that's not like you find it problematic.
But what if you do? Then you get to that point and you go, well, the narrators are telling me to suspend my disbelief. I can't do it.
Well, I imagine Uncharted is a terrible game for those people.
And I think that's what's happening with
The Last of Us
Part 2. Is they're going, suspend your disbelief, but also take this seriously. It's real, but it's also not real. And you could be a bigot in this world if you were here, and you would be unlikable. But you're also not. But
you're redeemable in that scenario, because and they're making a fair argument, in my opinion. It's like this violent world requires violent responses to stay alive and to stay together.
But that's what I feel like the first one does really well.
It does.
The second one, and maybe this is slightly a spoiler. I don't think it's a major spoiler, but it gets you to empathize. Mm-hmm. With the people you're killing, and the people. Doesn't really get you to empathize with the humans who have been taken over by the fungus. Which I watched a video that made that a point. Actually, was like, did you know that the ants who get taken over by this fungus are still conscious? They're just incapable of having control over their arms and legs.
You're making the game better because now it's a nightmare. It's like the word. It was already a nightmare, but now it's unbelievable.
But now realizing that all these humans are conscious as their bodies are being... They kind of have to be, if you think about it. They have to keep functioning for that to work.
Well, and like we have this image in our head of like the body snatchers, and you just completely lose your consciousness because they take it over.
Right.
Like, why is that the first place our minds go if something were to take over your mind?
Right.
Are you not conscious when you're on...
Great example is that when people first started, I forget what the disease is, but it makes it so that I say move my arm, and instead I go. And I say move my head, and my leg starts kicking around. So there's a disconnect. I forget what it is, but it's a nervous disorder that takes your brain thoughts and
sends them to the wrong place.
They get scrambled. So it's something the matter with your nervous system. Well, when they first started diagnosing this, they used to say, oh, this person has been taken over by a devil.
And I can see why
it would seem that way. And so our first inclination is to go, okay, this person is no longer there. They have been taken over by a devil. They've been possessed. And therefore, we must kill them.
And if they tell you that they are still there, it's the devil trying to deceive.
It's the devil trying to deceive you, so you need to kill them.
Uh-huh.
Or put them away from society.
Which is terrible, by the way.
It is terrible, because now we're realizing, no, those people are totally conscious and aware that they're incapable of making those functions.
They are intaking information. They understand that something is wrong.
They could be Albert Einstein, one of the most intelligent people ever, and we wouldn't know because their brain function scrambles everything. Mm-hmm. So why is that not the case here? It's the same argument. Just because we don't know doesn't mean that they're not living in there.
So why aren't we empathizing with the zombies? Right. And I've seen so many like zombie shows and other things which are like, they'll have a character.
Oh, what is that? Warm Bodies?
Oh, Warm Bodies is a bad example of this though, because Warm Bodies is actually trying to empathize with the zombies.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about the opposite.
Yeah, a lot of zombie shows where there will be a character who's like, "Hey, what if this is just some disease? Let's not kill these zombies. Let's try and help them out."
And then that guy dies.
Well, then that person is a terrible hypocrite, evil person who has to die now.
So either one of them, either they become a hypocrite, or they die from the zombies because they're like, "I'm not going to hurt you," and then they die.
Oh yeah, or they're like, "I'm not going to hurt you," and they're like, I was wrong. They aren't redeemable. I got to kill them now," and then they die.
And this is both theoretical and not theoretical.
Right. I mean,
because there are no zombies, but there are mobs of people.
Right. And there are people who don't have any empathy for groups of people.
There you go.
And that is very common.
That's actually what we discussed, me and Jess discussed in one of our previous videos. You'll see it later because we have our videos queued up. But we talked about how people just lump black people together. You just say, "Oh, you're all from Africa, the country, Africa."
The country, Africa.
And you all think this way, this way, this way. And that's, first of all, that's racist. But second of all, that's the same idea here, is that you group just because a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, not all zombies.
Another great example is the Women's March. How many different opinions are trying to be expressed in the Women's March?
Right.
Like infinite, almost infinite.
Although I think
they don't all agree.
Although I think some people would say that a lot of these protests, and it depends on the protest.
And we're
not talking about anything in specific.
Right. When I say mob, I mean these are outside protests. Protests on the large percentage are peaceful.
Right. Well,
and even when they're not, the mass majority of people at the protests are peaceful, and there's just a few that are being violent or whatever.
I feel like we are so far from video games.
We are.
Just real quick, I'm not talking about anything in particular. I'm not talking about current events. I am, but I'm talking about them in context of all protests we've seen, maybe specifically in America. A lot of the time, the protest is, let us have a voice so we can be different. We can have different opinions.
I see what you're saying.
So, like, if women were fighting for women's suffrage, it wasn't all women believe that we need women's suffrage. It was that we don't all agree, and we don't all agree with men. So let us at least have this.
Right.
Let it be a true democracy, and let us at least express ourselves specifically, because we are different people.
Which is why I'm not against the Women's March. I'm
right.
totally for it, and that's why. It's because I know that we are all better off if women have a more equal place in society.
If everybody does.
Yeah.
If everyone has a voice, I think we are better off.
If black people are safer with police and with cities,
it's very important.
Then everybody is.
Yeah, for sure.
Everybody's safer.
It's the negativity spirals. If it's not safe, if it's not safe in one aspect of life, it'll corrupt other aspects of life.
So this is the point I'm getting at, is that's what makes the story a little difficult. Mm-hmm. And why, if you're, say, a formalist, which a lot of critics are.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
If you're a formalist, you go, no, this is accurate. You shouldn't have to fall in love with all the characters.
Right.
There doesn't need to be a good versus evil, and that all the good characters are lovable and all the bad characters are bad and are evil and you hate them. And so you end up with a situation like that. But then the reader response, right, is, no, I want to be able to like the characters even if they're bad.
Yeah.
The anti-hero, right?
So if you look at, the idea of challenging media has been around for a good amount of time now.
Sure.
And it's been a real slow process for it to like get into every aspect of I think especially with films, like the filmmaking, but it extends to other art forms as well, where
maybe it's been in fine art for a longer time.
Right, where you go back to old westerns and all the good guys are good, all the bad guys are bad. No, not the first wave of westerns.
Okay.
Not the gritty.
Because I was about to say, spaghetti westerns are complex and nuanced.
No, that's the new wave. That's when art started to be like what we're talking about.
Those are the only ones I'm familiar with.
Okay,
That's why
I mean
confused.
like the original golden age of westerns. All the good guys.
Would that
are good.
include John Wayne? Or is he more like second wave? He's like in between.
I think he's in between, and then what went through the second wave.
Okay.
But specifically, those old ones where there was like a song and dance in every one.
Okay.
And the main character would like play the ukulele and sing under the moonlight.
Oh, made fun of in
Hail Caesar.
Hail Caesar.
That's a great movie.
That is a good movie.
But I get way off topic. But the point is that back then all the good guys were good, all the bad guys are bad. Mm-hmm. Then I think of a movie like Birdman, where the main character is likable and relatable.
Yeah.
But he is extremely flawed.
Yes.
I think about Joel.
Yeah.
Joel is likable and relatable, but extremely flawed, and you can acknowledge those flaws.
So that's already challenging media. That's already media that requires you to fall in love with someone that isn't just straight up good.
Yeah.
But
we're not straight up good.
But they took it to that's the problem I think people have, is it was taken to the next level.
Step of they're not even likable.
And maybe we've gotten and maybe we've gotten too caught up in The Last of Us Part 2 and trying to explain what makes a good video game, but I think it's a good example because there's escapism, but there's reality, but there's, do you need to have a likable character? Is it okay that it just matches the reality? And that's where we get into complicated area, because traditionally the idea is, does the form match the content? Well, then it's good. So that's why you have critics saying this is good.
Yeah, they're saying based on this world that was created that's analogous to our world, if this fungus existed. They're saying this,
and there wasn't an easy cure like there is.
They're like, this is as good, if not better, a portrayal of that world than the first game.
Right.
And you know what? I think that's how I kind of feel.
Okay.
Although I'm also a little different because I find this new main female lead, I find her likable.
Right.
Which I know is the main thing.
This is the main thing that people have.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't like her.
But let's get into this idea that both of us agree very, very well on. Is that it is still on tracks, though. It is a linear game. And what is the interface for a game? It is not linear. It's an art of choice.
Some of the levels are a little bit more open than the first one. But
open
the story
only in area, not in story.
Yeah, the story is never open.
Character motivations cannot be changed by
your action.
Player input.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So let's take a game real quick because we're getting close out of time. But we can go longer if you'd like to.
We might have to.
Okay. Because you got a game like BioShock.
Yes.
First one. Okay? BioShock 1. And it's linear. It's on tracks. You can't make many different story decisions. You can
there's the little...
You can uncover story by finding the audio tapes.
There's the Little Sisters.
Little Sisters, that is the one choice that you can make. But guess what it does at the end?
It has a big reveal. This is major spoilers.
It is, but
it's for an old game.
It's okay though, because if you haven't played it by now, I mean, it's been 12 years.
Yeah.
13 years.
But basically, at the end, you find
you've been controlled the whole time.
That there was a trigger phrase.
There was no choice for you.
Yeah, and it's a really clever flip where it's almost like a commentary on the video game. It's like, we need there to be linearity to tell a story that we want to tell.
Otherwise, we have to make 5 movies.
Yeah.
In the video games.
Let's give a reason why it's so linear.
Yeah.
And I think that's very clever.
Very, very clever, because basically The Last of Us is just as linear with no explanation of why it's linear. Other than the main reason why people do enjoy playing BioShock without knowing that information, which is that the motivations seem reasonable enough. Where you go, yes, I do want to do that. As the player, I'm cool with going along with this.
That you can attach yourself to the character and fully make the decisions that they would be making.
Halo's the same way.
Yeah, it is.
It's a linear story, but the motivations... Now, here's the thing, though.
But it's simpler characters.
It's easy to push people in one direction if the motivation is survive or destroy the enemy, or...
if it's simpler. If it's less complex of a motivation to
and
grasp.
the game is a first-person shooter.
Yes. The Master Chief...
Great example of this is you and I play open world games differently. So
Do we?
let's take Breath of the Wild. Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild.
Another amazing game.
Amazing game on multiple levels. Story not being one of them.
Not at all.
Story's pretty darn bad.
It's horrendous.
It's like Morrowind in that way.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe the characters there's slightly more development with the characters, but hardly any.
And the writing is similarly choppy in both. I would say the only thing that they have over each other is Breath of the Wild has modern gaming standards and better movement.
Correct.
Maybe slightly
So the
better combat.
The gameplay is...
And then Morrowind has more flavor, maybe, in the world.
I feel like it has more flavor. The voice acting's better.
That's hilarious. Welcome, traveler.
Welcome, traveler.
He's like doing this as he says it. Welcome, traveler.
Then fighting is just like, oh. But that's not why I still love it to this day. Anyway, you go and you destroy everything. You kill all the monsters, you get all the treasure, you get all this stuff.
Yeah. No empathy for the monsters.
No empathy, and you're just going for it. And it's not necessary to the story, but you do it anyway. Me, I'm running. I'm getting away from those monsters.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I gain as much stamina and as much speed as I possibly can so I can get to the next story point.
And I'm out here murdering everybody.
Right.
although I will say that has less...
That even shows in our Morrowind picks. Because my end guy is a guy who's a god, but doesn't wear a shirt, doesn't carry any money, and just has like 2 rings on his fingers. And that's it. And he's able to fly at infinite speed everywhere.
Well, he has to wear the helmet to fly infinite.
No. My new guy doesn't have to do that.
Oh,
it's in a ring.
Ooh.
Because you can actually enchant a side point here. You can enchant a exquisite ring more than you can enchant an exquisite any other piece of clothing or any piece of armor. It has like 1,500.
Weren't you using an elite helmet in the first game? In the first playthrough?
I was using an Ordinator helmet. Yeah.
But no, an elite Ordinator helmet.
No, because the elite Ordinator
It's
helmets
DLC exclusive.
Are already enchanted with something. So
okay, and also it just doesn't matter. But you were saying
no, it does because you get to make choices and you decide whether you're going to be the guy that's decked out with everything and you're going to open every cave and everything.
Are you going to do every single thing?
Are you going to do
which
everything?
I try to do.
Or are you going to be like me and you're like, no, I just want to be perfected so that I can travel this world and engage with the character that is the world the way I want to.
Yeah, so
making it open makes it possible. That's the art of choice, right? Is I can play the game completely differently than you.
Although here we get into the fact that it's not a binary again. Because
and that's the problem with BioShock is you ended up with just 3 resolutions.
So
you ended up with, I saved all the little sisters and now I get to grow up with them and watch them get married and go to college and stuff. Or they drown you.
Yes.
Or they're dead and so you just are all alone and you die in the ocean.
Yeah.
I believe those are the endings. I'm not positive. I only
know the save all of them ending. Because I'm a good guy.
Because
I don't murder all the monsters. No, I was gonna say that I love 100% in games, and it's really hard to do that with open world games.
Yes.
But among other things,
Morrowind makes it impossible.
Among other things, open world is such a like buzzword. It's such a thing. It's such a part of gaming culture now.
Right.
And the main reason Breath of the Wild is so celebrated is because the formula that was created for open world games largely by Bethesda.
True.
didn't change. It didn't change until Breath of the Wild came out.
Interesting.
And
That's
it still isn't changing. Even I don't know if you know this game. Even a masterpiece like Horizon Zero Dawn struggles with the fact that it feels like other games.
Oh, okay.
And that's another point towards The Last of Us. Like, what are you doing in this world that's completely your own? Because you can get really good character writing in other games. You can get amazing character writing in TV shows.
Yeah.
Like, what are you offering me that I can't find other places?
That's a good point. Other than the specifics of it. It's one thing to be like, okay, I'm going to associate with the anti-hero Walter White.
Yes.
Is very different, only in specifics, to I'm going to associate with Joel, the anti-hero. Joel. That's it. Because otherwise they're pretty similar kind of points of view.
Uh-huh.
You have this...
And then even the zombies, there's so much zombie media.
Yeah, right.
And saying it's a fungus isn't enough. Take like Halo, the Flood is a totally different take on zombies.
It does feel like it, yes. It feels like a different enough.
Well, and space zombies, just by nature, is slightly more unique than Earth zombies.
Right.
People love Dead Space.
So let's talk about two other games real quick, because I think they're important to this discussion. Because when we've had this discussion in the past, Minecraft comes up all the time.
What a game.
What a game, because your first inclination is to go, so interface equals game, right? So
yeah, the game you're creating should be suited perfectly to the interface of the medium.
You need to have many, many opportunities to make choices, both small and large. What better game to do that than Minecraft?
Just give it to like Minecraft, Terraria. Those are the best games of all time. No, I'm not saying that. I don't think that. But I'm saying as long as that's your opinion, it perfectly needs to match the mantle. You know, the thing that we've discussed, the freedom of choice in games.
But it's even worse story and character than Morrowind, potentially.
Well, it doesn't have that.
Yeah, it doesn't have zombies?
Yeah, but
what's the point of them?
Yeah, they're just
conflict.
They're enemies. Yeah, everything in everything.
I've never played Minecraft, by the way, so I am in the dark here. But
I've watched someone play Terraria, and I've played one Minecraft world, and I enjoyed both. I wouldn't call either my favorite game, but the point I'm making is that if we care so much about freedom of choice, and that's all we care about, those are the best games of all time.
They have to be.
They're formless. They're formless other than what you input.
Right.
You input the form into the game itself. Right. If you create a house, it's not because houses are supposed to be created.
Especially when you can start doing mods, right? Because then you can start changing up elements of the game.
I mean, you're modding a game that is basically already just like, do whatever you want.
The base format.
It's a sandbox.
Well, that's why some people would also say that a game like Roller Coaster Tycoon is a very, very good game because it gives you plenty of choices. But there's still enough story that you're trying to reach goals, right?
So, and here is the big Zach thing. The big like, oh, I don't like how it's so binary. I like linearity in certain contexts.
Sure.
So for me, I'm a big Zelda fanboy. Breath of the Wild isn't even my favorite Zelda game, despite being unbelievably inventive and open world and completely unique. Nothing's going to replicate that until the next Breath of the Wild game comes out.
But you already said your favorite is Majora's Mask,
which is more linear than that game.
Yes.
It is. There's less choices that you can make.
Yes.
There is very little.
Well, technically, every video game gives you infinite choices within a certain area, but
relative to the story
exactly.
and what you're cutting out or including.
It's not like you're playing BioShock and all of a sudden you can be like, well, now I'm Kirby and I'm going to swallow these monsters and take on their traits. It's like, no, and the world suddenly becomes a big cloud. It's like it doesn't work that way.
I think it just comes down to what the individual values most.
Okay, well then you do care about reader response to some degree.
Oh, I care about it almost fully.
Okay.
So the thing, like, the overall objective quality of a game, to me, if we're not just going to go by how much money it makes, is an aggregate of how everybody feels about it, as long as everyone is experiencing it as purely as they can.
So you're kind of a postmodernist on this then.
I'm a postmodernist in a lot of ways.
You really are. Because what you're basically saying is, hey, all these people are going to be coming at this piece of media, this medium, I should say this title, right? They're going to come at this title, this piece, with a whole bunch of different directions.
Right.
And they're all going to have competing or differing virtues, what they consider to be virtuous in the game. And you're cool with it just being what people end up deciding.
Right.
So you're not much of a
formalist.
You're not much of an elitist either.
Well, and I will say this, I get caught in saying like, oh, this thing isn't good or this thing is good.
That's your personal opinion.
Well, but a lot of it comes down to, can you elaborate on why you feel that way?
Yeah, I like that too.
Like what? Do you feel that way? I mean, the way you feel about it is valid.
Right.
But you know how you can make me understand that it's valid is explain it to me.
Yeah.
It's
not enough to make a statement. You need to back it up.
You can't say The Last of Us 1 is the greatest game of all time and you don't need my reason, I just liked it.
Right, because you're going to argue, well, then you must value the visual story of it more than choice, more than escapism.
It's like, I'm going to ask that person, do you like movies? Do you like TV shows? And if they're like, no, then I'm like, I think you should give them a shot. That's what I mean.
You should give that a shot.
So when people are confused by me when I say games like Pikmin or The Legend of Zelda are some of my favorite games of all time and not these big open world games or these big story-driven linear games. They're like, how could those be your favorite games? I'm like, I care about level design. I care about music. I care about the culture of the place that you're in, the atmosphere.
So here's the problem, because then that sounds like you should like. So I have a book. It's called The Art of Video Games. It's published by a bunch of Smithsonian historians who love video games. And they interviewed a whole bunch of video game developers, and they have a whole bunch of titles on there. And what they basically decided was the best example of art in video games is Mass Effect 2.
Yes.
And the reason why is they said, so let's say choice is very, very important. Mass Effect 2's got it.
Tons of it.
Tons of it. You have tons of opportunities to make choices.
Not as much as Minecraft, but the choices that you are making have impact on a story that has very strict form.
Right.
And it probably is the most choice for any game like that.
Yeah. But it has pretty good characters, pretty good character development, could have better, has a pretty good story, graphics are great, the visuals are beautiful, the ideas are complex, and
everything other than the choice part is done well.
Yes.
The combat's pretty good.
Gameplay could be a little bit better still.
But at least it's serviceable. It's not horrendous.
No, it's not.
It's kind of like The Last of Us, where it's a serviceable gameplay.
Exactly. And then the music is good. And
amazing at points.
Amazing. The Presidium, the song for the Presidium.
That's a really good one.
That's a very, very, very good song.
It's a great space opera just in terms of lore writing.
Specifically a neo-modern space opera.
Right.
It just sounds like
and
a
it's
neo-modern.
Unique. It doesn't feel like any other space opera to me.
That's true.
So by all means, it should be my favorite game.
So why isn't it?
Well, I mean, okay, first off, Majora's Mask basically I think it probably might have formed some of how I feel about video games, because it literally takes everything I care about the most and makes it as good as it can possibly be.
But I like what you're saying. Maybe it did inform your decisions in the future.
Yeah, because the things I care about most as of now are music, atmosphere, style, level design, gameplay.
But more than that. So I always like to get to the base emotion of things, and that's the thing that you like. That's what people love about Majora's Mask. You want a game that hits you right here.
In the feels.
In the feels. That's wow.
And yeah,
there aren't many games like that.
And it doesn't do it in a simple way. It takes a surprisingly subtle approach to it.
It's rather formalist too, because the form of the game, the form of the story, matches entirely the emotion that you get out of it, the catharsis that you feel. Mm-hmm. And I think that's not exactly a description of The Last of Us, but that's why people loved The Last of Us. It was a game, you took people that are Call of Duty guys, Call of Duty, Halo guys, and made them feel something in a video game. That was their first time. Because like we talked about, and I totally believe this, is you want a game to make people empathize with others, you can't pick a better game than Undertale.
Oh, that's so funny that you're talking about Undertale now. I was like, we need to mention one more game.
Yeah.
And that's Undertale. Because it's funny that I would pose Undertale as my pick over Mass Effect 2 for what those people were trying to.
Because you do have choices.
They were trying
major consequences.
First off, Undertale is more rooted in the history of video games than Mass Effect is.
Okay.
So much more.
Mass Effect might be more
in the history of sci-fi.
Okay.
Mass Effect is rooted in Star Trek and nerds.
True.
Undertale is rooted in gaming history.
Yeah, it feels kind of like Pokemon.
It feels like Earthbound. It feels like Paper Mario. It feels like JRPGs. It feels like bullet hells. It feels like a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Next, the music is insane. It's so insanely good.
Very, very, very good.
The choices are even more impactful than they were in Mass Effect 2.
Well, that's what's so interesting, because there are more consequences in Mass Effect 2.
Yeah, well, there's more.
The galaxy at the end of the game is completely different from where you start. Completely different.
Well, but what would you call the end of the genocide run versus the pacifist run?
No, you're right. The implication is
huge.
Is that the world is taken over by some being.
And if you do a genocide run and then a pacifist run,
and then it starts taking over your computer.
Yeah. Well, it's a game that pushes so many boundaries while still being a good game. So another game that's kind of,
but it doesn't have good graphics.
It doesn't. I don't care. I care more about the style. Did it achieve the style it was going for?
And now we come to a very important point. The reviewers for The Last of Us Part 2 don't care about the melodrama of the story. Is there a good versus evil? They don't care. And the users don't necessarily care. That's not their most important point either. But the critics are willing to just straight up ignore that, not even discuss it. But the users don't necessarily need it to be good versus evil. They need to have characters they love. Lovable characters. And so that's what they're arguing. I didn't get a lovable character. That is a priority for me. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it doesn't matter how good of music, graphics, gameplay it is. Does not matter. Mm-hmm. If I don't get characters that I can love.
I liked that about I'm not saying this is me, but for them, I liked that about the first game. Mm-hmm. You know, not only was it a challenging game, but it was a challenging game that I was experiencing through the lenses of someone that I totally connected with.
Right.
Now I'm playing a challenging game, and the veil is ripped away, and now I'm just looking at the challenge and the nightmare without anything to have me pull through.
Right.
And so
that's why people aren't completing The Last of Us Part 2. Many of them are stopping the game and saying, this violence is too intense. I've empathized with the people that I'm killing.
Yeah.
Can't do it anymore. I'm not finishing the game. But that's what's so interesting about Undertale, is it does the same thing.
It does.
But it gives you a choice whether to kill these characters that you are falling in love with. First of all, there are very, very lovable characters.
Pretty much every single character has some type of charm to them.
Extremely lovable. So they give.
And they're flawed.
They're flawed.
They are flawed.
But they give. Well, there's probably one has no flaws. There's like several that have no flaws.
Well, okay, but like
Papyrus is
nearly
a
flawless.
perfect human.
He's a little ignorant. A little.
That's not a flaw.
But like, the most powerful people in the world are flawed. Sans is flawed.
Yeah.
Asgore is flawed.
Yes. Asgore is probably the most flawed.
But he is still lovable.
Yeah, you
you totally understand.
So you have these lovable characters, but you're not forced to kill them.
You don't have to, which is already the gaming thing we were talking about earlier. You have the choice. You see these people and you say, will I kill them anyway? Even if the game is pushing me to kill them, am I going to try and find a way out, and help them?
And you can still get that escapism. Mm-hmm. There is still an escapist element, and then you're ripped back into reality, where they say, oh, you think I'm just a video game character? No. I am a representation of how you're willing to treat real people.
But it never gets to a point where, by choosing the pacifist run, it never gets to a point where it's not a fun game. It's not.
Yeah.
It's like it is still a game that you can enjoy.
And this is the part that I love. This is why I love Undertale. Are you a good person just making one good choice?
No.
No. You're a good person for making
every good choice.
Lots of good choices.
Yeah.
At least a majority, if not most, of your decisions are...
There are situations where everyone talks about Toriel. Most people kill her because they don't know they can't. They can avoid it.
Right.
And then from there, it's a little easier not to kill things. It's kind of like, you can make bad choices, but the second most of your choices are bad and evil and immoral, the genocide run starts and your game's unsavable. Like your game's unsalvageable. You've killed too many people. The music slows down in the area you're in. It becomes like stally grind fest. So it's weird. You have to be good. You have to be really good to be good. And you can be corrupted easily, but in order to ruin everything, you have to be as bad as possible and go out of your way to be as bad as possible.
And I think that's more realistic.
It's more layered. There's more steps along the way.
And it's more realistic. Yeah. So I guess we're hitting some points. I don't know if we've got any definite, defining elements, other than you do need to strike a balance between reality and escapism. You have to strike a balance between giving the user choice, but also giving them lovable characters and story, and having character development. But while also striking a balance between the story and characters and the world as a character.
Yes, and also having a game that is fun to play.
And that would still relate to the choice, right? You got to make people want to choose to keep playing. Like we talked about with BioShock. Never at least for me, never at any point did I think, oh, this sucks that I have to do this thing. I'm like, no, I need to do this to survive. I need to do this to live and to get to my next point. It felt like a natural choice that I would have made anyway. I didn't feel compelled by the game to do it. But when I got to the end of the game and they were like, actually, you were compelled. If you did want to do something else, you wouldn't have been able to because of a story reason. That was powerful.
Well, I think my conclusion is that video games are so hard. They're so hard, and that's the big problem. Is you're gonna there's a way to improve no matter what game you release. Undertale, there are things it could have improved on. Mass Effect 2,
better graphics, better gameplay, honestly.
More diverse gameplay.
Yeah. Yeah, at least diverse.
And then there's stuff Mass Effect 2 could have improved on. I feel that way.
Yeah,
it could have been. I think it could have been more unique. I think
Gameplay,
could have been better, smoother.
better character development, maybe. Yeah, there's stuff that
Last of Us
on.
1 could have more freedom of choice, more story endings. There's and it could have a more unique world.
Yes. A less realistic world.
So I guess the point is that I don't know if the game developers should be aiming to make perfect games.
Right.
But they should be aiming to make the stuff that they care about as good as they can make it.
Right.
Say, I really care about music and level design. I imagine that's the creators of Zelda at Nintendo. They probably prioritize those two things a lot.
Yeah.
Every single game they've released features masterclass in those two elements.
Yeah, if not some of the best music ever created.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's stick it with that. We can come back to this conversation at a later date if you want to, but
maybe we could. Yeah.
There's a lot to chew off here, so let's leave it at that. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Subscribe and like. We'll try and have Zachariah on another time, and let us know in the comments what you think of video games and what you would like to have us talk about next.
Yeah, for sure.
So thanks for watching, and see you later.